What's up, guys? I need to tell you something that happened to me 3 months ago that completely changed my perspective on everything. And I mean everything. But before I get into the crazy part, let me paint you a picture of where my head was at. Picture this. It's 2 a.m. I'm sitting in my LA apartment, staring at my phone screen with bloodshot eyes, trying to come up with the perfect caption for a sponsored post about protein powder that I honestly never even use. My followers were expecting their daily dose of Tyler Chen content, and I was completely empty inside. You know that feeling when you look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back at you? That was me every single morning. I had 2.3 million people hanging on my every word, brands throwing money at me left and right, and I should have been living the dream. Right? Wrong. I was drowning in my own success. The breaking point came when I posted a simple mirror selfie with the caption, "Living my best life," and got 400,000 likes in 6 hours. The problem? I had spent that entire day crying in my bathroom because I felt so disconnected from reality. The irony was suffocating me. Here I was, telling millions of people how to live their best lives, while I was falling apart behind the camera. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I turned off my phone completely and just sat in silence. No notifications, no comments to respond to, no brand emails demanding immediate attention. Just me and my thoughts. And honestly, it terrified me how uncomfortable that silence felt. I started thinking about who I was before all of this. Before the blue checkmark, before the brand deals, before strangers on the street knew my coffee order because I'd shared it in my stories. I used to be just Tyler, a kid from Orange County who loved hiking and making people laugh. When did I become this performance artist living for the validation of strangers? The next morning, I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram, probably looking for inspiration or maybe just procrastinating on creating content, when this ad popped up. It was for this group adventure trip to the Pacific Northwest. 7 strangers, 1 week, hiking through Oregon's wilderness. The tagline read, "Disconnect to reconnect." Something about that phrase hit me like a truck. Disconnect to reconnect. When was the last time I had connected with anyone without thinking about how it would look on my feed? When was the last time I had a conversation that wasn't somehow related to my brand or my image? But here's where it gets interesting. As I'm reading through the trip details, this wild idea starts forming in my head. What if I could go on this trip without being Tyler Chen, the influencer? What if I could just be nobody special? What if I could experience what it felt like to be a regular person again? The more I thought about it, the more desperate I became to make it happen. I imagined sitting around a campfire with people who didn't know my follower count, who didn't want to take selfies with me, who wouldn't judge me based on my last post's engagement rate. People who would get to know me for who I actually was, not the carefully curated version of myself I presented online. So I did something completely insane. I booked the trip under a fake name. Well, not completely fake. I used Ty, which is what my family calls me, and I said I was a freelance graphic designer from San Diego. Close enough to the truth that I wouldn't get caught in major lies, but far enough that nobody would connect me to my online persona. I spent the next week preparing for this elaborate deception. I went to Target and bought the most basic clothes I could find. Jeans that weren't designer, hoodies without any recognizable brands, sneakers that cost less than what I usually spend on lunch. I felt like I was putting together a costume for the role of normal person. The night before the trip, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, looking at this version of myself I hadn't seen in years. No ring light, no perfect angles, no filters. Just me, wearing clothes that didn't cost more than most people's rent. And for the first time in months, I smiled a genuine smile. But as I was packing my basic backpack with my basic clothes, this wave of anxiety hit me. What if someone recognized me anyway? What if I couldn't pull this off? What if I had forgotten how to be a normal person? The stakes felt impossibly high because this wasn't just about a vacation. This was about finding myself again. I remember lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life or about to embark on the most important journey I'd ever taken. Little did I know that in less than 24 hours, I'd meet someone who would completely change everything about this trip, and honestly, everything about my life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I had to survive getting to Portland without blowing my cover, and trust me, that was harder than you might think. So there I was at LAX at 6 a.m., wearing my Target disguise and feeling like the world's most anxious undercover agent. Every time someone looked in my direction, my heart would skip a beat. Was that recognition in their eyes, Or were they just wondering why some guy was sweating profusely in an airport terminal? The flight to Portland was torture. I kept my hood up and sunglasses on, pretending to sleep while my mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if the person next to me was a fan? What if someone had seen my Instagram stories from the past few days and put two and two together? I had posted some generic content about taking a break to recharge, but nothing specific about where I was going. When I landed in Portland, I felt this weird mix of relief and terror. I had made it this far without being recognized, but now came the real test. I was about to spend a week with 6 strangers who would be studying my every move, my every word, my every reaction. One slip-up and my whole plan would crumble. I found our meeting spot near the baggage claim, and that's when I saw them. My fellow adventurers were already gathering, and I felt this overwhelming urge to turn around and catch the next flight back to LA. But something deeper kept me walking forward. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was hope. Jessica was the first person I noticed. She had this warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes in a way I hadn't seen in forever. In my world, everyone's smile was calculated, practiced, designed for maximum camera appeal. But Jessica's smile was just real. She was bouncing on her toes with excitement, talking animatedly to this tall guy with a beard who I later learned was Brandon. Brandon had this calm, professor-like energy that immediately put me at ease. He was pointing out different bird calls he could hear even inside the airport terminal, and instead of finding it annoying, the group was actually listening with genuine interest. When was the last time someone had listened to me talk about something I was passionate about without immediately asking how many views it would get? Then there was Sarah, this petite woman with bright purple hair who was making everyone laugh with her commentary about airport security. Her humor was sharp but kind, the type of wit that builds people up instead of tearing them down. I found myself genuinely laughing for the first time in weeks. Not the performative laugh I used in my videos, but an actual, from-the-gut laugh. Maya was quietly sketching in a notebook, occasionally looking up to observe our group dynamics. There was something artistic and thoughtful about the way she moved, like she was constantly composing the world around her. When she caught me watching her draw, she smiled shyly and showed me her sketch of Jessica mid-laugh. It was beautiful and captured something I never could have gotten with my camera. But then there was Alex. While everyone else was introducing themselves and sharing their excitement about the trip, Alex hung back, observing from the edges of our little circle. They had this quiet intensity that reminded me of something, though I couldn't quite put my finger on what. When it was my turn to introduce myself, my mouth went completely dry. This was it, the moment of truth. "Hey everyone, I'm Ty," I said, and hearing that name come out of my mouth felt like putting on a comfortable old sweater I'd forgotten I owned. "I'm a freelance graphic designer from San Diego, and I honestly just needed to get away from screens for a while." The lie came out so smoothly, it scared me. But the weird part was, it didn't feel entirely like a lie. I did need to get away from screens. I was desperate to escape the digital prison I'd built around myself. What happened next blew my mind. Nobody asked for my Instagram handle. Nobody wanted to take a selfie. Nobody seemed impressed or unimpressed by my supposed profession. They just accepted me. Jessica asked if I liked hiking. Brandon wondered if I'd ever been to Oregon before. Sarah made a joke about graphic designers and their coffee addiction. It was the most normal conversation I'd had in years. But as we were waiting for our shuttle to the hotel, I caught Alex watching me with this curious expression. Not suspicious exactly, but like they were trying to solve a puzzle. When our eyes met, they quickly looked away. But something about that moment made my stomach flip. During the shuttle ride, everyone was sharing stories about what brought them on this trip. Jessica talked about burning out as a nurse during the pandemic and needing to remember why she loved helping people. Brandon mentioned going through a divorce and wanting to rediscover who he was outside of his marriage. Sarah had just finished a brutal project at work and needed to remember what fun felt like. When it got to Alex, they gave this vague answer about working in tech and needing a digital detox. Something about the way they said it felt familiar, like they were choosing their words very carefully. But I was too focused on preparing my own carefully crafted backstory to think much about it. Maya talked about feeling stuck in her art and hoping nature would inspire her creativity again. Her honesty was refreshing and made me realize how long it had been since I'd talked about my actual feelings instead of just promoting products or maintaining my image. As we pulled up to our hotel, I felt this unexpected surge of emotion. For the first time in months, maybe years, I was excited about something that had nothing to do with content creation or follower growth. I was excited to just be a person among other people. But that excitement was mixed with this underlying anxiety that never quite went away. Every conversation felt like walking a tightrope. Every laugh, every story, every reaction had to be carefully calibrated to maintain my cover, while still being genuine enough to actually connect with these people. Little did I know that my biggest challenge wouldn't be maintaining my fake identity. It would be discovering that I wasn't the only one playing this game. The first morning of our actual adventure, I woke up feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Pure excitement without any underlying dread about what content I needed to create. No ring light to set up, no perfect breakfast to stage, no morning routine to perform for the camera. Just me, waking up naturally as sunlight streamed through the hotel curtains. When I met the group for breakfast, everyone was buzzing with anticipation about our first hike to Crater Lake. Jessica was practically vibrating with energy. Brandon was already identifying bird calls from the restaurant patio, and Sarah was making everyone laugh with her impression of our overly enthusiastic tour guide. But as I watched everyone interact, I noticed Alex again, sitting slightly apart, observing more than participating. There was something about the way Alex held themselves that felt familiar, like looking into a funhouse mirror. They engaged just enough to not seem antisocial, but always seemed to be calculating their responses. When Brandon asked Alex about their photography experience after noticing their expensive camera, Alex deflected with a casual, "Oh, I just like taking pictures," before quickly changing the subject to ask Maya about her art. Our first hike was absolutely magical, and I mean that in the most genuine way possible. As we climbed higher into the Oregon wilderness, I felt layers of anxiety and performance pressure literally falling away with each step. The air was crisp and clean, nothing like the smoggy LA atmosphere I'd grown accustomed to. For the first time in months, I was breathing deeply without thinking about how it would look in a wellness post. But here's what really got to me: the conversations. Real, unfiltered, human conversations. Jessica told us about a patient who had changed her perspective on life. Brandon shared his knowledge about the ecosystem around us with genuine passion, not because he was trying to build a personal brand as a nature expert. Sarah made observations about our group dynamics that were hilarious and insightful. Maya pointed out details in the landscape that made me see beauty I would have missed. And nobody was documenting any of it for social media. Nobody was asking for the perfect group photo or trying to capture the most Instagram-worthy moment. We were just present, living in the moment instead of performing it. That first night around the campfire was when I realized how starved I'd been for authentic human connection. We shared stories, laughed until our stomachs hurt, and sat in comfortable silences watching the flames dance. I found myself talking about my childhood, my family, my dreams before social media existed, things I hadn't thought about in years because they weren't on brand. But I also noticed that Alex was doing exactly what I was doing, sharing just enough to seem open while keeping the deeper truths carefully hidden. When Jessica asked Alex about their family, the response was vague. When Brandon inquired about Alex's work in tech, the answer was generic. It was like watching myself from the outside, and it made me both curious and nervous. The second day brought our hike to Multnomah Falls, and that's when I started noticing more things about Alex that didn't quite add up. While the rest of us were taking basic phone photos and selfies, Alex was using professional camera techniques. The way they composed shots, understood natural lighting, and captured candid moments of our group showed serious skill. When I complimented their photography, expecting maybe some enthusiasm about a hobby, Alex just shrugged and said, "Thanks, I just mess around with it sometimes." But I caught them reviewing their shots with the critical eye of someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. Someone who understood angles, composition, and storytelling through images. That evening, as we set up camp near a beautiful creek, I volunteered to help Alex with their tent. As we worked together, I noticed their hands. They were soft, well-manicured. Not the hands of someone who worked a typical tech job. They were the hands of someone who spent time in front of cameras. Someone who paid attention to details like that. During dinner, Sarah started asking everyone about their social media habits, joking about her own Instagram addiction. Most of the group laughed and shared their favorite apps or complained about screen time. But both Alex and I gave suspiciously similar answers about trying to use social media less, about wanting to be more present in real life. The third night was when my paranoia really kicked in. As everyone was sharing embarrassing stories around the campfire, I watched Alex deflect every question that got too personal. When Maya asked about Alex's most embarrassing moment, the story they told was generic enough to be completely made up. When Brandon asked about Alex's biggest fear, the answer was so carefully neutral, it could have applied to anyone. I was doing the exact same thing, giving carefully crafted responses that revealed nothing real about Tyler Chen, the influencer who was terrified of being alone with his own thoughts. But seeing someone else play the same game made me realize how obvious it probably was. That night, lying in my sleeping bag and staring up at more stars than I'd seen in years, I felt this weird mix of peace and anxiety. The peace came from being disconnected from my digital life, from not having to worry about engagement rates or brand partnerships or maintaining my image. But the anxiety came from a growing suspicion that I wasn't the only one hiding something significant. There was something about Alex that kept nagging at me. The expensive gear, the professional photography skills, the careful way they navigated personal questions, the soft hands, the way they sometimes seemed to catch themselves before saying something. It all felt too familiar, like looking at my own behavior from the outside. But more than that, I was starting to genuinely care about these people, which made my deception feel heavier with each passing day. Jessica's kindness, Brandon's wisdom, Sarah's humor, Maya's artistic soul, and yes, even Alex's mysterious presence. They were all becoming real to me in a way that my online relationships never had. I was falling in love with being Ty, the normal guy who could just exist without performing. But I was also terrified that this beautiful illusion I'd created was going to crumble, and when it did, I'd lose the most authentic connections I'd made in years. What I didn't know was that tomorrow would bring a conversation that would change everything, and that my carefully constructed secret was about to collide with someone else's in the most unexpected way possible. Day 4 started like any other morning on our trip, but it ended up being the day that completely shattered my carefully constructed world. We were supposed to hike as a group to this remote waterfall that Brandon had been excited about since day 1. Everyone was pumped, packing their day bags and chatting about the trail ahead. But then disaster struck, or at least what felt like disaster at the time. The night before, I had gotten up in the dark to use the bathroom and twisted my ankle on a route I didn't see. It wasn't serious, just a minor sprain, but it was enough that I knew I couldn't handle a challenging hike without making it worse. I was devastated. Here I was, finally experiencing what it felt like to be a normal person on a normal adventure, and my body was betraying me. I told the group I'd stay back at camp and rest, trying to hide how disappointed I was. The last thing I wanted was to be the influencer who couldn't handle real outdoor activities. That's when Alex surprised me. While everyone else was expressing sympathy and getting ready to head out, Alex quietly said, "You know what? I think I'll stay back too. I've been wanting to explore the area around our campsite, and this seems like the perfect opportunity." I protested, telling Alex they shouldn't miss the hike because of me, but they insisted. Something about the way they said it made me wonder if they had their own reasons for wanting to stay behind. As the rest of the group headed out, promising to take lots of pictures for us, Alex and I found ourselves alone for the first time since the trip began. The morning started innocently enough. We set up by this beautiful creek near our campsite, sharing trail mix and the sandwiches Jessica had made for everyone. Alex had brought their camera and was taking photos of the water, the trees, the way the light filtered through the canopy. I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't even with the full group. But then Alex said something that made my blood run cold. "You know, Ty, you're really good at deflecting personal questions." I laughed nervously, trying to play it off. "What do you mean? I'm an open book." Alex looked at me with this knowing expression that made my stomach drop. I should know. I do the same thing. Before I could process what that meant, Alex pulled out their phone. My first thought was panic. Were they going to expose me somehow? But instead, they opened Instagram and showed me a profile that made my jaw literally drop. It was their Instagram account. 1.8 million followers, professional travel photography, sponsored posts with major outdoor brands. Alex wasn't just some random person on this trip. They were Adrian Walsh, one of the biggest travel influencers on the platform. "I recognized you on day 1, Alex said quietly, and I felt like the world was spinning. "Tyler Chen, right? The lifestyle guy? Your Target outfit was a nice touch, but you forgot to cover that distinctive tattoo on your wrist." I was speechless. Completely and utterly speechless. All this time I'd been worried about maintaining my cover, and someone had seen right through me from the beginning. But more than that, they had been playing the exact same game I was. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. For 3 days, I'd been carrying this weight of deception, constantly monitoring every word, every reaction, every story I told. And here was someone who understood exactly what I was going through because they were doing it too. "Why didn't you say anything?" I finally managed to ask. Alex, or Adrian as I now knew them, smiled sadly. Same reason you didn't, I imagine. I needed this. I needed to be nobody special for a while. That's when the floodgates opened. We spent the next 2 hours talking about everything we'd been holding back. The pressure, the anxiety, the way social media had consumed our identities until we didn't know who we were without it. Adrian told me about panic attacks before posting, about the imposter syndrome that came with online fame, about feeling like a fraud when people called them an inspiration. I shared my own struggles, the sleepless nights worrying about engagement rates, the way I'd started to see every experience through the lens of content creation, the loneliness that came with having millions of followers but feeling like nobody really knew me. I came on this trip because I was losing myself, I admitted, and saying it out loud felt like releasing a breath I'd been holding for months. Me too, Adrian replied. I saw that ad and thought, what if I could just be a regular person for a week? What if I could have conversations that weren't about my brand or my image? The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Here we were, two influencers who had come on this trip to escape our online personas, and we'd found each other anyway. But instead of feeling like our covers were blown, it felt like we'd found the one person who could truly understand what we were going through. Before I continue with what happened next, if you're enjoying this story about finding authenticity in the most unexpected place, I need you to do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because this story gets even more intense from here. Also, smash that like button if you've ever felt like you were losing yourself in your online persona. And drop a comment below telling me about a time when you just wanted to be anonymous and start over. I read every single comment, and your stories mean everything to me. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to want to escape sometimes. The conversation Adrian and I had that afternoon changed everything about the rest of our trip, and honestly, everything about how I approach my life online. But first, we had to figure out what to do with our secret, and that decision would test everything we thought we knew about authenticity and friendship. So there I was, sitting by this creek in the middle of nowhere, Oregon, staring at someone who had just completely shattered my understanding of the past 3 days. Adrian was looking at me with this mix of relief and anxiety that I recognized because I was feeling the exact same thing. This is so ridiculous, Adrian said, starting to laugh. Not at me, but with me, like we were sharing the world's most absurd inside joke. We're both here trying to be normal people, and we end up finding each other. The laughter was contagious, and soon we were both cracking up by this beautiful creek. Two influencers who had accidentally blown each other's cover while trying to escape our digital lives. But underneath the laughter, I could feel something deeper happening. For the first time in months, I was talking to someone who truly understood the weight I'd been carrying. Tell me something, I said when we finally caught our breath. How long have you been feeling like you're drowning in your own success? Adrian's smile faded, and I saw something raw and vulnerable cross their face. About 8 months ago, I posted this sunset photo from Santorini. Beautiful shot. Perfect caption about living in the moment and embracing gratitude. It got 2 million likes. They paused, staring at the water flowing past us. The problem was, I had spent that entire sunset crying behind my camera because I felt so disconnected from everything. I was in one of the most beautiful places on Earth, and all I could think about was whether the photo would perform well and if my engagement was dropping. My chest tightened because I knew that feeling intimately. I did something similar last month, I admitted. Posted about self-care and mental health awareness. Got hundreds of thousands of likes and comments about how inspiring I was. But I had written that caption at 3 a.m. while having a panic attack about whether I was becoming irrelevant. Adrian nodded like they understood completely. The worst part is the guilt, right? Like, how can you complain about a dream job? How can you tell people you're struggling when you're living a life that millions of people would kill for? Exactly, I said, feeling tears I didn't expect starting to form. My family keeps telling me how lucky I am. My friends think I'm living the perfect life, and meanwhile I'm having existential crises about whether anything I do actually matters. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing the relief of finally being able to say these things out loud to someone who wouldn't judge us or tell us to be grateful for our opportunities. You know what the craziest part is? Adrian continued. I came on this trip thinking I was the only person who felt this way. Like maybe I was just weak or ungrateful, or not cut out for this life. But seeing you here, playing the same game I was playing, it makes me realize maybe this is just what happens when you live your entire life for an audience. That hit me like a punch to the gut because it was so accurate. I haven't had a genuine moment in months that I didn't immediately think about how to monetize or contentize, I confessed. I went to my nephew's birthday party last week, and caught myself staging candid shots instead of just enjoying watching him blow out his candles. Adrian winced. I went on a date 2 months ago, and I spent the entire dinner thinking about whether the restaurant was aesthetic enough for my stories. The poor guy was trying to have a real conversation, and I was mentally composing captions. Did you see him again? I asked. No, Adrian said quietly. He texted me afterwards saying he felt like I wasn't really present, and he was right. I wasn't. I haven't been present for anything in so long, I forgot what it felt like. The honesty was overwhelming. Here was someone who understood the specific type of loneliness that comes with online fame. The way you can be surrounded by millions of people who think they know you, while feeling completely isolated from any real human connection. So what do we do now? I asked. Do we tell the others who we really are? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, watching the water flow over the rocks. What if we don't? What if we just let ourselves be Ty and Alex for the rest of this trip? We can deal with Tyler and Adrian when we get back to real life. The idea was both terrifying and liberating. You mean just continue pretending? Not pretending, Adrian corrected. Being. Maybe Ty and Alex are who we really are underneath all the performance and pressure. Maybe this is our chance to remember who we were before we became brands. I thought about the past 3 days. How natural it had felt to laugh at Sarah's jokes without thinking about my image. How good it felt to listen to Brandon's bird facts without calculating their content potential. How peaceful it was to watch Maya's sketch without immediately asking if I could share it on my stories. I think you're right, I said. I think Ty might be more real than Tyler has been in a long time. Adrian smiled, and it was the first completely unguarded expression I'd seen from them. So we have a deal? We keep each other's secrets and just try to be human for the next 3 days? Deal, I said, and we shook hands like we were sealing some kind of sacred pact. But as we sat there, I realized something that both excited and terrified me. This conversation with Adrian was the most real, authentic interaction I'd had in months. They understood things about my life that my closest friends couldn't grasp, fears that I'd never been able to articulate to anyone else. Can I ask you something? I said. After this trip is over, after we go back to being Tyler and Adrian, do you think we could stay friends? Like, real friends? Not just industry connections? Adrian's eyes lit up in a way that made my heart skip. I was hoping you'd ask that. I think I need someone in my life who understands what this is really like. As we packed up our impromptu picnic spot, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not hope for more followers or better engagement or bigger brand deals, but hope for genuine human connection. Hope that maybe I didn't have to choose between success and authenticity. Hope that maybe there was a way to be both Tyler and Ty. When the rest of the group returned from their hike that evening, chattering excitedly about the waterfall and the wildlife they'd seen, Adrian and I shared this secret smile. We were conspirators now. Partners in the most important deception of our lives, the deception of finally being ourselves. But what I didn't realize was that keeping this secret would bring us closer to the rest of the group in ways I never expected, and that the next 3 days would teach me more about friendship and authenticity than years of online interactions ever had. The rest of the group came back from their hike that evening absolutely glowing with excitement, and Adrian and I shared this secret smile that felt like we were part of some underground resistance movement. Jessica was practically bouncing as she described the waterfall. Brandon had spotted 3 different bird species he'd never seen before, and Sarah was already planning jokes about how Adrian and I had probably spent the day gossiping about them. If only she knew how right she was, just not in the way she imagined. What happened over the next 3 days was something I never could have predicted. Having Adrian as my partner in this elaborate game of being normal didn't make me feel more isolated from the group. Instead, it made me feel more connected to everyone than I had felt to anyone in years. See, when you're constantly performing your life for millions of strangers, you forget how to just exist with people. Every interaction becomes calculated, every response filtered through the lens of your personal brand. But knowing that Adrian understood the weight I usually carried somehow lifted that weight entirely. That night around the campfire, I found myself actually listening to Jessica's stories about her patients, instead of thinking about how I could turn her experiences into content about healthcare heroes. When she talked about an elderly man who had taught her that healing wasn't just about medicine but about human connection, I felt tears in my eyes. Real tears, not the performative emotion I sometimes forced for my more serious posts. Brandon started sharing his knowledge about the constellations above us, and instead of mentally calculating whether astronomy content would resonate with my audience, I just let myself be amazed by the vastness of the universe. Adrian caught my eye during one of Brandon's explanations about how light travels across impossible distances to reach us. And I saw the same wonder there that I was feeling. Maya had been sketching throughout the day, and when she showed us her drawings of our group, I was stunned. She had captured something in each of us that I'd never seen in any of my professional photos. In her sketch of me, I looked relaxed, genuinely happy, present in a way that no camera had ever captured. "You look different here," Maya said, showing me the drawing. "More, I don't know, more yourself somehow." Adrian and I exchanged a quick glance, and I felt this warmth spread through my chest. Maya was seeing Ty, not Tyler. She was seeing the person I was when I wasn't performing, and apparently, that person was worth sketching. Sarah, being Sarah, started asking everyone about their biggest fears. It was the kind of deep, late-night conversation that I usually avoided, because vulnerability wasn't part of my brand strategy. But sitting there under those stars, with Adrian beside me, and these incredible people around me, I found myself wanting to be honest. "I think my biggest fear is disappearing," I said, and the words came out before I could stop them. Not dying, but just becoming irrelevant, fading away until nobody remembers I existed. The group was quiet for a moment, and I panicked, thinking I'd revealed too much. But then Jessica reached over and squeezed my hand. "That's not going to happen," she said simply. "You're too real for that." Real. She called me real. If she only knew how hard I'd been working to remember what real even felt like. Adrian shared next, talking about their fear of never being truly known by anyone, of always being seen as a projection of what people wanted them to be. The irony wasn't lost on me that we were both sharing our deepest truths while hiding our biggest secrets. But somehow it felt more honest than anything I'd posted online in months. The next day brought our most challenging hike yet, and that's when I really saw the magic of what Adrian and I had created. Without the pressure of maintaining our individual facades, we both relaxed into being part of the group in a way that felt effortless. When Jessica struggled with a particularly steep section of the trail, I helped her without thinking about whether it would make good content. When Brandon got excited about a rare bird sighting, Adrian and I celebrated with him like his joy was our joy. When Sarah made a joke that had us all laughing so hard we had to stop hiking, I didn't reach for my phone to capture the moment. I just lived it. That evening, as we were setting up camp, Maya pulled me aside. "I don't know what happened yesterday when you and Alex stayed back," she said, "but you both seem different. Lighter somehow." She was right. Having someone who understood the specific pressures of my real life had somehow freed me to be more present in this fake life I'd created. It was like Adrian and I were holding each other's secrets, and in doing so, we were holding space for each other to just be human. But the most beautiful part was watching Adrian transform too. They started sharing more stories, laughing more freely, engaging with the group in ways that seemed to surprise even them. During our night hike that evening, they told us about their childhood dream of becoming a park ranger, something I was pretty sure they'd never shared on their travel blog. "What stopped you?" Brandon asked. "Life, I guess," Adrian replied. "I got caught up in other things, forgot what really mattered to me." As we walked through the forest with our headlamps creating little pools of light in the darkness, I realized that this trip was giving both Adrian and me something we'd lost, the ability to dream about who we could be, instead of just managing who we already were online. That night, after everyone else had gone to sleep, Adrian and I sat by the dying embers of our campfire and made a pact. We promised each other that when we returned to our real lives, we'd find ways to bring Ty and Alex into Tyler and Adrian. We'd try to be more authentic online, more honest about our struggles, more real with our audiences. "I want to tell people about this trip," Adrian said quietly. "Not the Instagram version, but the real version. The version where two burned-out influencers found themselves by pretending to be other people." "You think people would understand?" I asked. "I think people are starving for real stories," Adrian replied. "I think they're as tired of the performance as we are." As I fell asleep that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Excitement about my future that had nothing to do with follower counts or brand partnerships. I was excited about the possibility of being authentic, of using my platform for something meaningful, of showing people that it was okay to struggle even when your life looked perfect from the outside. But first, we had to survive one more day without blowing our cover, and that was going to be harder than either of us anticipated. Our second-to-last day started with what should have been a simple group photo, but it almost became the moment that completely exposed everything Adrian and I had been hiding. We were at this absolutely breathtaking scenic overlook, the kind of view that makes you understand why people become obsessed with travel photography. Jessica was trying to get a group shot of all of us with the mountain vista in the background, but she was struggling with the lighting and composition. "Does anyone know anything about photography?" she asked, holding her phone at various angles and getting increasingly frustrated. Without thinking, both Adrian and I stepped forward at the exact same time, our mouths already opening with professional advice. "You want to position us so the sun is behind the mountains," I started saying, while Adrian simultaneously said, "Try getting lower and shooting upward to make the mountains look more dramatic." We caught each other's eyes mid-sentence and froze. The rest of the group was staring at us with this curious expression that made my heart start racing. "Wow," Brandon said slowly. "You two really know your stuff. Are you sure you're not photographers or something?" The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. I could practically hear my pulse in my ears as I scrambled for an explanation that wouldn't blow our cover. Adrian looked equally panicked, and I realized we were both calculating how much we could reveal without giving everything away. "I just watch a lot of YouTube tutorials," I said weakly. At the same time, Adrian mumbled something about taking a photography class in college. But Sarah, being the observant person she was, wasn't letting it go. She tilted her head and studied both of us with this detective-like intensity that made me want to disappear into the mountain landscape behind us. "You know, now that I think about it," Sarah said, and my stomach dropped. "You both have really nice gear for casual hikers. And Ty, yesterday I heard you giving Maya some pretty sophisticated advice about building an online presence for her art." Maya nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, you seem to know a lot about social media algorithms and engagement strategies. Way more than most graphic designers would." I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to fall into a chasm that would destroy the most authentic week I'd had in years. All the connections I'd made, all the genuine moments, all the peace I'd found in being Ty instead of Tyler, it was all about to crumble because of a stupid group photo. Adrian and I exchanged a look of pure panic. We had been so careful about our backstories, so meticulous about avoiding topics that might give us away. But we'd forgotten that our professional instincts would be harder to hide than our identities. Brandon was nodding thoughtfully. "And Alex, that camera you're using isn't exactly amateur equipment. Plus, the way you compose shots, understand natural lighting, it's pretty advanced stuff." I watched Adrian's face go pale. We were both caught, exposed by our own expertise in the fields we'd been trying to escape. The irony was almost funny, except I felt like I might throw up. But then something beautiful happened. Maya, sweet, artistic Maya, jumped in with a perspective that saved us both. "Who cares what they do for work?" she said firmly, looking around at the group. "They're cool people, and that's all that matters to me. Maybe they're professional photographers, maybe they're just really good hobbyists, maybe they're secretly famous or something. I don't care. They've been nothing but kind and genuine this whole trip." Jessica nodded immediately. "Maya's right. I don't care if Ty is actually a CEO or Alex is a professional photographer or whatever. They've helped me with my tent, listened to my stories, made me laugh. That's what matters." Brandon smiled and shrugged. "Fair enough. We all have our reasons for being here, and we all have parts of our lives we might not want to share with strangers. As long as you're good people, which you clearly are, that's enough for me." Sarah grinned and held up her hands in surrender. Okay, I'll stop being nosy. But just so you know, if you two are secretly famous photographers, I'm totally going to ask for tips on my Instagram game later." The moment passed, but the relief I felt was overwhelming. These people had essentially given Adrian and me permission to keep our secrets while still accepting us as part of their group. They had chosen to value our character over our credentials, our present selves over our hidden pasts. That afternoon, as we hiked through some of the most beautiful terrain I'd ever seen, I found myself walking next to Maya. She was sketching as we walked, somehow managing to capture the landscape while navigating the trail. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for what you said back there." Maya looked up from her sketchbook and smiled. "Everyone deserves the right to be whoever they want to be, especially on a trip like this. I came here to escape my regular life too, in my own way. I figured you and Alex might have your own reasons for wanting to be just Ty and Alex for a week." Her understanding hit me right in the chest. Here was someone who barely knew me, but had instinctively protected my right to reinvent myself, even temporarily. It was the kind of kindness I'd forgotten existed in the world. That evening around the campfire, the conversation turned to transformation and change. Jessica talked about how the trip was helping her remember why she became a nurse in the first place. Brandon shared how being in nature was healing something in him that his divorce had broken. Sarah admitted that she'd been feeling stuck in her career, and this adventure was reminding her that she was braver than she thought. When it was my turn to share, I felt this overwhelming urge to tell them everything. To explain that I was Tyler Chen, that I had millions of followers, that I'd come on this trip because I was drowning in my own success. But instead, I found myself talking about something deeper. I think I've been living my life for other people for so long that I forgot who I actually was, I said, staring into the flames. This trip is reminding me that I'm allowed to just be a person, not a performance. Adrian caught my eye across the fire, and I saw understanding and support there. They knew exactly what I meant, and having that silent solidarity made me feel less alone than I had in months. I feel like I've been wearing a mask for so long that I forgot what my real face looked like, Adrian added. Being here with all of you is helping me remember. The honesty in that moment was breathtaking. Here we were, two people living elaborate lies, sharing the deepest truths we'd spoken in years, and somehow the contradiction made perfect sense. As we prepared for our last full day together, I realized that this trip had given me something I hadn't even known I was looking for. Proof that authentic connection was still possible, even in a world that seemed designed to make everything superficial. But I also knew that tomorrow would bring our return to reality, and I had no idea how to reconcile the person I'd become on this mountain with the person I'd have to be when I got back to LA. The thought of leaving Ty behind and returning to being Tyler felt like preparing for my own funeral. Our last morning came way too fast, and I woke up with this heavy feeling in my chest that I couldn't shake. In a few hours, I'd have to say goodbye to these incredible people who had gotten to know the real me. Not Tyler the influencer, but Ty the person who laughed too loud at bad jokes and was terrible at setting up tents. As we packed our gear for the final time, the atmosphere was bittersweet. Everyone was exchanging contact information, making plans to stay in touch, talking about reunions and future adventures. But I felt like I was living in two different worlds that were about to collide in the most painful way possible. Jessica hugged me tight and said, "Promise me you'll stay in touch, Ty. You've been such a bright spot on this trip." The guilt hit me like a physical blow because she was saying goodbye to someone who didn't technically exist. Brandon clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're welcome on any of my future hiking trips, man. You've got a good spirit." Maya showed me her final sketch of our group, and there I was again, looking genuinely happy in a way that no professional photographer had ever captured. Sarah, being Sarah, made everyone laugh by rating our camping skills and declaring that Alex and I were tied for most mysterious, but surprisingly helpful. If only she knew how mysterious we really were. But it was the moment with Adrian that nearly broke me. As the group was loading into our shuttle to the airport, we hung back, both of us knowing we needed to have a conversation that the others couldn't hear. "So," Adrian said quietly, "back to reality?" "Yeah," I replied, but my voice came out rougher than I expected. Back to Tyler and Adrian. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment, both of us processing what it meant to return to our digital lives after a week of being genuinely human. The weight of going back to performing our lives for millions of strangers felt crushing after experiencing what authentic connection actually felt like. "I don't want to lose this," I said suddenly, surprising myself with the intensity in my voice. "I don't want to lose who I was this week, and I don't want to lose you as a friend." Adrian's eyes lit up with relief. "I was hoping you'd say that. I've been dreading going back to my apartment and having to be on again. Having to curate every moment, calculate every post, perform happiness instead of just feeling it." We exchanged our real contact information, our actual names, our genuine social media handles. It felt like the most honest transaction I'd made in years. "Promise me something," Adrian said. "Promise me we'll hold each other accountable to being more real online, to showing people that it's okay to struggle, okay to take breaks, okay to be human." "I promise," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. The shuttle ride to the airport was filled with laughter and promises to stay connected, but I spent most of it staring out the window, trying to memorize the feeling of being part of a group that valued me for who I was, not what I could do for their image or their content. At the airport, our final goodbyes were emotional in ways I hadn't expected. These people had seen me at my most authentic, and they had chosen to love that version of me. As I watched them head to their various gates, I felt like I was losing a family I'd just discovered I had. 3 months later, as I'm recording this video, I can tell you that this trip changed everything about how I approach my life and my content. Adrian and I have become genuine friends, the kind who check in on each other's mental health, not just each other's engagement rates. We've both started being more honest online about our struggles, more transparent about the pressure that comes with our platforms. And you know what? Our audiences have responded better than we ever imagined. Turns out people were starving for authenticity, tired of the constant performance, ready for influencers who were willing to admit they didn't have it all figured out. I told the rest of the group about my real identity about a month after we got back. I was terrified they'd feel betrayed or lied to, but their response was the opposite. Jessica said she'd suspected something because I had that look people get when they're used to being watched. Brandon laughed and said it explained why I was so good at reading group dynamics. Maya asked if she could paint a portrait of me that captured both Tyler and Ty. Sarah predictably said, "I knew there was something mysterious about you two. Next time, just tell us you're famous so we can get better group photos." But here's the thing that really matters. That trip reminded me why I started creating content in the first place. It wasn't for fame or money or validation from strangers. It was to connect with people, to share real experiences, to maybe help someone feel less alone in the world. Adrian and I both changed how we approach social media after that week. We're more honest about our bad days, more transparent about our mental health struggles, more willing to show the unglamorous parts of our lives. And honestly, our content is better for it. More engaging, more meaningful, more human. So that's my story. If you made it this far, you're absolutely incredible, and I'm grateful you took this journey with me. If this resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because I'm committed to sharing more real, unfiltered stories like this one. Give this video a thumbs up if you've ever felt like you were losing yourself in your online persona, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to want to be anonymous sometimes. Most importantly, drop a comment below and tell me, if you could be completely anonymous for a week, what would you do differently? How would you act if nobody knew who you were? I read every single comment, and your stories inspire me to keep being honest about this crazy digital life we're all navigating together. And Adrian, if you're watching this, thank you for keeping my secret, and for reminding me who I really am underneath all the performance. You're the best undercover hiking buddy a guy could ask for, and I'm grateful every day that we found each other in that beautiful Oregon wilderness. Remember, it's okay to want to be normal sometimes. It's okay to take breaks from being your brand. And it's definitely okay to prioritize authentic human connection over digital metrics. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.